day.
Welcome to the Tainted Tavern, the place where every drink is poured with a damn good story. And today I've got a whiskey review for you. And before I forget, rush out and pick up A Dark History of Whiskey, a whiskey book like no other, written by my favourite whiskey writer of all, that's Gary Dobbs. Wait, that's me, okay, plug. But it's the new whiskey book, Whiskey Noir, which takes a look at the darker history of whiskey. Whiskey Noir, if you like. So A Dark History of Whiskey is available now anywhere books are sold. Go grab it. And today's whiskey is near to my heart. It's also near to my home, because it's Penderyn, the Welsh whiskey company, makes Penderyn, and they are situated not 10 miles away from where I'm talking to you now, and I visited the distillery several times. So this is Penderyn Celt. It's had no artificial colourings. You can see it's a light colour here. It's no age statement, of course. Penderyn do tend to bottle most of their expressions at the younger end of the scale. We know it's more than 3 years old though, because like Scotch, it must be matured for 3 years. And today, I believe, Welsh whiskey now has got protected status, the same as Scotch and English whiskey and all other whiskey. So Penderyn Celt, this is billed as a peaty expression, though it's not treated with peat, but it is aged in ex-bourbon barrels, usually from the Buffalo Trace distillery. So, as I say, it's non-chill filtered, which is really good. Because chill filtration, sometimes if a whiskey is stored at room temperature for a long period, or ice or water is added and it brings down the temperature, it can go hazy. And this is caused by a process called flocation, in which the oils, fat and oil particles form in the whiskey. The natural fat and oil particles which are there will form and create bigger clumps, which makes it hazy. So chill filtration is a process where the whiskey is chilled right down, I believe, to lower the -10, and then put through a filter to remove all these oils and so forth. But many claim that also filters out a lot of the natural flavors that are found in the whiskey. So this is non-chill filtered, which is good news. It's also had no added colouring, and it's crystal clear in the bottle, and it's kind of light, so it's kind of hair coloured. The bottles, of course, are corked. It's not a screw top. So let's pull that out and pour it into a Penderyn branded glass. Glug, glug, glug. Is there any finer sound in the world? Well, perhaps there's one finer sound, and that's someone flipping the pages of my new whiskey book, A Dark History of Whiskey, which is available now anywhere books are sold. Okay, so we'll take this to the nose in a moment and give it a taste, see what we get from it, and then we'll add a little bit of water, just a touch of water, and see what differences that makes in taste, if any. On the back of the bottle, we are promised a nose of peat smoke, warm marmalade on toast. I'm a peat lover, and I'm not really getting peat on this. Maybe a little burnt licorice. So the palate, the bottle promises sweet, smoky with medicinal flavors. We'll try that in a minute. Now, before I taste this, so let me give the history of the wonderful Penderyn distillery.
When Penderyn started out distilling whiskey distillation in Wales was a forgotten art. It all came from the fact that in the late 1990s, a chat between friends in a Welsh Valley pub in Hyrwyn resulted in the dream of Penderyn Distillery. I was actually used to drive a bus up around Penderyn, and I met one of these men, and we had a conversation, and I asked him how Penderyn started, and he told me that the conversation in a pub took place because recently they'd all seen a documentary about Scotch whisky on the BBC, and it was mentioned there that, no whisky is made in Wales, and so that led them to the dream. He said that none of them were particularly whisky aficionados when it started, and so the village of Penderyn was chosen as the setting for the distillery because of the site's own supply of fresh natural spring water running down from the majestic hills of the Brecon Beacon. A unique copper pot still designed by David Faraday, who was a relative of the late 19th century Michael Faraday, was installed at the distillery in 2000 and produces a spirit at an industry high draw of 92%, meaning that Penderyn's whiskies are light, fruity and flavoursome. The business, though, still seemed a curiosity to many in the whisky world. A Welsh whisky? But when Scottish whisky expert Dr. James Swan became the master distiller at Penderyn, things got serious and people started to take note of Penderyn. Dr. Swan got involved because he said the Faraday still would create a world-class spirit. Initially, they finished their whiskies in Madeira casks, and this still remains to an extent a house style, but this quickly advanced to sherry casks, peated casks, port casks, and a number of other casks used for finishing. Today, Penderyn is a success story and sends out a taste of Wales to all corners of the globe. Long may it continue to do so.
Okay, now, so it's 40% ABV, 70 cl bottle. I picked up this week actually for about £27. That's around the usual retail price, anywhere between 25 and 30 something pounds. It's the Celt. They also do in this range, they do a myth and a legend, I believe. All of them have the dragon on the bottle there, which is the national emblem of Wales, home to Welshmen. So let's take it to the nose. So yes, as I said, to me, I'm getting a burnt licoricey aroma, and maybe some fruit though. But let's take it to the palate and see how peated this is, because as I say, I am a big fan of peated whiskies. When I'm drinking, I drink a lot of peated Scotch. It's perhaps Lagavulins, Lefroy. I drink a fair few of peated whiskies. Peated whiskies are among my favourites. I much prefer generally an Islay whiskey, say, to a Highlands or a Lowlands. We're diverging now, aren't we? This is Penderyn, a Welsh whiskey. A Welsh single malt. So that was surprisingly fruity, but I'm not getting peat though. Not really getting any peat from this. No peat in the slightest. So if it is peated, it's a very small amount of phenols floating around in this. I really can't detect any peat. It's fruity, it's soft, it's delicate. It's got an oily mouthfeel, which goes in its favour. It's got a good mouthfeel. The finish on it is mild. Let's add a little bit of water to this, and we're going to use Brecon Carriage water. So this water comes from the Brecon Beacons. which is where Penderyn Distillery is at the very foot of the Brecon Beacons. So the water sourced for this whiskey has actually come from Brecon Beacons, and the water we're going to add to it is from the Brecon Beacons. Not a lot, just a slight splash of water. That's plenty. 2 little drops. And we'll allow the water to do its thing, because even with a lower ABV whiskey, like a standard 40% whiskey, the ethanol, it's still a strong drink in terms of alcohol, and the ethanol can often act as a prison on the surface of the whiskey and trap in a lot of the flavours. And when it gets into your mouth, then that ethanol is front forward and it can hide a lot of the flavours. So the addition of water, a tiny amount of water like that doesn't really proof the whiskey down. But if it does, it's a fraction of a percent, so it's not really proofing the whiskey down. But it does allow the whiskey to open up. So let's swirl it around in the glass, and while we're doing that, we look at the legs, which are pretty decent. This is a good single malt. You get a nice experience from drinking this stuff. It's not the most complex single malt, but those legs, look at the legs running down that glass. The camera wouldn't, I doubt the camera's picking that up, but the legs are substantial. So this is a quality single malt. It's a bit on the lighter end of the spectrum. It's not punchy in any way, but I can't say it's light in terms of flavour. It is full flavoured. But to me, there's very little of peatiness to this expression at all, even though it's billed as peaty and citrusy. The citrusy I'd give it, there is some fruit in there. Let's take it back to the nose again. Now the water's done its stuff. The water has immediately tamed the drink. The ethanol has been dialed back a little bit. And that smell that I described as burnt licorice is still there, but it's a bit milder, a bit softer. And yes, I think it may be giving me a charcoaly kind of note there. So let's take it palate. The citrus is definitely there. It's fruity. Some cloves. I'm still not getting any peat though, which if I was expecting a peat monster out of this, because it's billed as being peaty, I would be severely disappointed. I'm not getting any peat from it, but this is a decent, soft whiskey. It's quite delicious. And Penderyn have done really well, because at the moment there are several Welsh distilleries, Aberfoyle being one of the newest, but there are several Welsh distilleries. But when Penderyn first launched and first put their whiskies onto the market, there hadn't been any Welsh whiskey distilling for about 100 years or more. And Penderyn now is probably the flagship Welsh whiskey, although some of the newer distilleries are snapping at their heels, so they can't afford to rest on their laurels. They do need to bring out quality product, and this Penderyn Celt is a decent whiskey. The Penderyn, perhaps my favourite in Penderyn's range is the Madeira, which again isn't peated, but it's aged in Madeira casks. I really like that expression. This is very good as well, and I can't think of any negatives to this, other than it doesn't deliver, in my opinion, on the peatiness that it promises. There's a single malt Welsh whiskey that undergoes a finishing period in ex-peated quarter casks, specifically from Islay. So, rather than peat actually being added, it goes through its maturation goes through finishing in Islay casks from Islay. So, pour another one.
Please come back.